My name is Olivia and I'm 31 years old. Growing up, my sister Madison and I were inseparable. We shared everything, from clothes to secrets to dreams. When she got engaged, I was overjoyed and immediately promised $50,000 from my savings to help create her dream wedding. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I received an email that shattered our bond. "Don't come to my wedding. Just watch the live stream, LOL," my sister wrote. I stared at those words for hours before making a decision that would change everything. Before I dive into the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of real-life storytellers. Madison and I grew up sharing not just a bedroom, but our entire lives. We were only 2 years apart, and those early years set the foundation for what I thought would be an unbreakable bond. Our room had 2 twin beds pushed against opposite walls, but most nights, one of us would sneak into the other's bed, where we'd stay up whispering stories and giggling until Mom would shush us from the hallway. When Madison was 7 and I was 9, I spent an entire summer teaching her to ride a bike. She was terrified of falling, but I promised I wouldn't let go until she was ready. The day she finally pedaled away on her own, the pride in her eyes meant everything to me. That summer, we also created our own secret language, a mixture of made-up words and hand signals that confused our parents and amused us to no end. Even into adulthood, we'd occasionally text each other in that silly code when we needed to share something private. Middle school brought its own challenges. Madison struggled with a group of mean girls who targeted her for her braces and slightly awkward phase. I was in high school by then, but I'd often wait by her locker to walk her home, creating a buffer between her and the bullies. Once, I confronted the ringleader, a girl named Rachel, and while I never threatened her, my protective big sister speech was enough to make them back off. Our teenage years only strengthened our connection. When Madison wanted to go to prom with her first serious boyfriend, Tyler, but couldn't afford the dress she'd been dreaming of, I picked up extra shifts at the ice cream shop where I worked. The night before prom, I presented her with the silvery blue gown she'd pointed out in the mall months earlier. She cried, and so did I. That same year, our parents went through a rough patch and separated for 3 months. During that time, Madison and I created our own stability. We established a weekly movie night tradition every Friday, complete with homemade popcorn and candy we'd buy in bulk to save money. We'd alternate who got to pick the film, and while our tastes were different, she loved rom-coms and I preferred mysteries. We never complained about the other's choice. That tradition lasted well beyond our parents' reconciliation, becoming our sacred ritual. College pulled us apart geographically. I stayed in state while Madison received a scholarship to a university 3 states away. But distance did little to weaken our bond. We scheduled weekly FaceTime calls every Sunday night, updating each other on classes, roommates, and romantic interests. When Madison graduated with $20,000 in student loan debt, I had just received a promotion at my first post-college job. I set up a monthly transfer to help her pay down that debt faster, telling her it was an investment in her future. When our grandmother passed away during Madison's final year of college, we leaned on each other in ways we never had before. Grandma Patricia had been our confidant and biggest supporter. We drove together to the funeral, taking turns behind the wheel for the 8-hour journey, sometimes crying, sometimes sharing favorite memories of Grandma's infamous chocolate chip cookies and unexpected life advice. The year after graduation was tough for Madison. Her college boyfriend, Derek, whom she thought would propose, suddenly ended their 3-year relationship. Madison fell into a depression that worried me deeply. I took a week off work to fly to her city, where I helped her clean her apartment, forced her to get outside for daily walks, and listened for hours as she processed her heartbreak. By the time I left, she was smiling again, not completely healed, but on her way. That's why I was so thrilled when, 2 years later, Madison met William at a charity fundraiser where she was volunteering. When she called me that night, her voice had a lightness I hadn't heard in years. She described him as thoughtful but ambitious, and I was immediately interested in meeting this man who had put the sparkle back in my sister's voice. My first impression of William when I met him 3 weeks later was positive but with a hint of caution. He was undeniably charming and seemed genuinely interested in Madison, asking follow-up questions when she spoke and looking at her with obvious affection. Yet there was something else there, a careful attention to status that I noticed in small ways. He casually mentioned the exclusive schools he'd attended and checked the labels on wine bottles before ordering. Madison seemed oblivious to these details, or perhaps they didn't matter to her. I decided my slight reservations were just big sister protectiveness and pushed them aside. William came from money. That much was clear from his tailored clothes and the casual way he spoke about his family's vacation home in Nantucket. But Madison never seemed concerned about the difference in their backgrounds. He loves me for exactly who I am, she told me during one of our calls. After 8 months of dating, William proposed during our family Christmas gathering. Madison, tears streaming down her face, immediately asked me to be her maid of honor. I accepted without hesitation, already mentally calculating how much I could contribute to give my sister the wedding she deserved. The first few wedding planning sessions were everything I'd imagined. Madison and I spent hours on Pinterest, creating shared boards for everything from flowers to bridesmaid dresses. When she fell in love with a venue that was slightly beyond her budget, I didn't hesitate. "I've been saving for something special," I told her. "Let me help. I've got $50,000 set aside. It's yours for the wedding." Her eyes widened. "Liv, that's too much," she protested, but I could see the hope in her expression. "What else would I do with it? You're my sister." "This is what matters," I insisted. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment things began to change. The first dinner with William's parents, Edward and Catherine Bradley. The Bradleys owned a chain of luxury hotels and moved in social circles that included politicians and celebrities. Their home was something out of a magazine, all gleaming surfaces and priceless art. During that first dinner, Catherine asked Madison about her people with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, while Edward spent most of the evening on calls he deemed urgent international business. After that dinner, Madison seemed different, slightly distant, checking her phone more often, laughing a little too loudly at William's jokes. At the time, I attributed it to nerves about impressing her future in-laws. I had no idea it was just the beginning of losing my sister. The first clear sign that something was changing came 3 weeks after meeting the Bradleys. Madison created a new wedding planning group chat that included William's sister Jennifer, his mother Catherine, and the wedding planner they'd hired, but not me. I discovered this accidentally when Madison's phone lit up during our lunch together, displaying messages from a group called Dream Wedding Team. When I asked about it, Madison brushed it off. "Oh, it's just for logistics with William's family. You wouldn't be interested in those boring details." The original venue, a charming converted barn where our parents had renewed their vows for their 25th anniversary, was suddenly too rustic. Instead, Madison had booked the Bradleys' preferred location, an exclusive resort that required membership or special connections just to tour the facilities. "But the barn had meaning for our family," I said during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "This is about creating new memories. Liv," Madison replied with a slight edge to her voice I'd never heard before. "Besides, the resort has better lighting for photos." Around this time, Madison began making comments about my appearance that she never would have before. "Have you thought about toning down your hair color before the wedding?" she asked during a bridal boutique appointment. My hair had been vibrant red for years, a color Madison had previously complimented countless times. "The photographer thinks it might distract in the photos," she explained when she saw my hurt expression. "Maybe something more natural?" "The bridesmaids should complement, not stand out." I agreed, telling myself it was her special day and such requests were normal. But the comments continued. about my too casual speaking style, my eclectic fashion choices, and even the simplicity of my apartment. Each observation was delivered with a smile but landed like a tiny paper cut. During a dinner with William's college friends, I overheard Madison introducing me to someone. "This is my sister Olivia. She's an education consultant." I blinked in confusion. I was a third-grade teacher at a public elementary school, a job I loved and Madison had always respected. Later, when I questioned her about it, she laughed nervously. "Educational consultant just sounds more professional, doesn't it? Besides, you do consult with parents and other teachers." Our conversations grew shorter and revolved almost exclusively around wedding details, not the fun, creative aspects we'd originally planned together, but logistics Madison needed help with. She canceled our traditional birthday dinner, a 16-year tradition, because the Bradleys had arranged a strategic meeting with potential investors at their country club that happened to fall on the same evening. What hurt most was watching Madison transform herself. She began adopting Catherine Bradley's precise way of speaking, her habit of touching her pearls when making a point, even her dismissive hand gesture when declining something. Madison started dropping references to books I knew she hadn't read and opinions on wines she'd never previously cared about. It was like watching my sister audition for a role in a play about rich people, desperately hoping to be cast permanently. For months before the wedding, Madison asked to meet at an upscale cafe I couldn't really afford. She arrived 15 minutes late, already checking her watch as if she had somewhere more important to be. "I need to talk to you about the wedding party," she began, stirring her $7 tea without meeting my eyes. "William and I have been discussing the balance of the bridal party, and we think, well, it would make more sense for Jennifer to be my maid of honor." Jennifer was William's sister, a woman Madison had met only 3 times and had previously described as cold as her tennis bracelet. "It's about family balance," Madison continued into my silence. "The Bradleys are very traditional, and since we're having William's brother as best man, it makes sense to have his sister as maid of honor. You understand, right?" I didn't understand at all, but I nodded mechanically. "Sure, of course. You'll still be a bridesmaid. And I'll still need your help with everything," she added quickly, finally looking up. Nothing really changes except the title. Everything had already changed, but I couldn't find the words to say it. 2 weeks later, I was invited to dinner at the Bradley Mansion, a 6-bedroom estate with a separate guest house larger than my entire apartment building. The obvious display of wealth was intimidating. Original artwork on every wall, furniture that looked too delicate to actually use, staff who appeared and disappeared silently to refresh drinks and remove plates. During dinner, Edward Bradley questioned me about my family background with the clinical interest of someone inspecting a specimen. "And your father was in construction, was it?" he asked, though Madison had surely told them our dad owned a small local plumbing business. "Yes, he built his company for nothing," I said proudly. "He started with just himself and now employs 15 people. Madison jumped in quickly. "Dad always had such a head for business. He consulted on several major commercial projects." I tried to catch Madison's eye, but she was focused on arranging her napkin perfectly across her lap. When I mentioned our childhood tradition of camping in the backyard during summer thunderstorms, Madison laughed too loudly and changed the subject. Later, as I was returning from the bathroom, I overheard Catherine Bradley in the hallway, speaking to what sounded like another dinner guest. "Madison is lovely, but her family isn't quite, well, you know. The sister especially is just not our kind. William says we need to be patient during the adjustment period." What shocked me more than Catherine's words was hearing Madison's murmured agreement. "Olivia means well. She's just not used to this world." I slipped back to the dining room before they could see me, my cheeks burning with humiliation. Still, I made excuses for Madison's behavior. The stress of planning a wedding while navigating new family dynamics was surely taking a toll. This wasn't really my sister. It was a temporary phase that would pass after the wedding. I continued writing checks for wedding vendors. $12,000 for the photographer Madison replaced last minute because the original one had worked with too many average venues. $8,000 for the string quartet that needed to be flown in from New York because local musicians weren't refined enough. Each time I transferred money, I told myself it was an investment in our relationship's future. Once the wedding was over, my real sister would return. By 5 months before the wedding, our once daily texts had dwindled to Madison occasionally messaging me with requests. Can you call the florist about the deposit or need the check for the cake by Thursday? Phone calls became rare, and when they did happen, Madison was distracted, often clearly multitasking. The breaking point of this phase came when I discovered through Instagram that Madison had hosted an engagement party at the Bradleys Country Club. The carefully curated photos showed my sister laughing with William's friends, cutting a custom cake and raising champagne flutes under twinkling lights, all without a single mention that her only sister hadn't been invited. When I called her, my voice shaking, Madison sounded genuinely confused by my hurt. It was just a small gathering that Catherine put together last minute, she explained. Mostly William's business contacts and family friends. You wouldn't have known anyone. I would have known you, I said quietly. Don't be so sensitive, Liv. There will be plenty of events you'll be at. Her voice had taken on the slightly patronizing tone Catherine often used. I've got to run to a menu tasting. Talk soon. The pattern of exclusion continued when Madison's bridal shower date was changed without anyone informing me. I arrived at the original venue with my carefully wrapped gift to find an empty private dining room. The hostess looked at me with pity. That party called yesterday to reschedule for next weekend due to a conflict. I later learned through a mutual friend that the conflict was Catherine Bradley's last-minute opportunity to secure a celebrity wedding planner for a consultation the same day, but only if they moved the shower. No one had bothered to update me. Even more hurtful was discovering that Madison had uninvited several of our childhood friends from the wedding, girls who had been part of our lives since elementary school. When Jessica, my oldest friend, called to ask what she'd done wrong, I was completely blindsided. Madison sent an email saying due to venue capacity issues, they had to make some difficult cuts, Jessica explained. But then I saw on Facebook that they've added all these people from William's firm. I just thought, did I offend her somehow? I promised to find out, but Madison's explanation was as hollow as I'd feared. We had to make room for some of William's father's business associates. It's complicated, Olivia. These connections are important for William's career. More disturbing was the evidence that Madison was systematically reinventing her past. The wedding website launched with the Our Story section that described Madison as having attended exclusive private schools, she went to public school with me, and growing up taking annual family trips to Europe. We had gone to the Wisconsin Dells for vacation and considered it the height of luxury. When I confronted her, Madison was defensive. It's just a little embellishment. Nobody checks these things. But it's not true, I insisted. And what about Mom and Dad? They know we never went to Europe. Madison's response chilled me. I've already talked to them. They understand the importance of presenting the right image to the Bradleys. Later, my mother reluctantly confirmed that Madison had asked our parents to downplay their careers if asked directly. Dad was to avoid mentioning his plumbing business and instead focus on the property development aspect of his work. Mom was instructed not to bring up her 20 years as a school secretary, but rather describe herself as having managed educational administration. While being systematically erased from Madison's narrative, I was still expected to finance large portions of her increasingly extravagant wedding. In early spring, I wrote a $10,000 check for flowers while being explicitly told I couldn't join the consultation because Catherine has very specific ideas about the aesthetic. At home that night, I reviewed my bank statements and was shocked to realize I had already spent $42,000 of my promised $50,000, money I had been saving for years with vague dreams of eventually buying a small house. Meanwhile, Madison complained about budget constraints while adding a champagne fountain, ice sculpture, and custom monogrammed napkins. I made several attempts to reconnect with my sister emotionally. I invited her to our parents' house for dinner, hoping the familiar setting might bring back the Madison I knew. She arrived an hour late, checked her phone constantly, and left early for an important call with the venue coordinator. When I suggested meeting for coffee at our old favorite cafe, she agreed, but spent most of the time dismissing my concerns. "You're overthinking everything," she said when I tried to talk about the distance between us. "It's just wedding stress. Everything will go back to normal after the ceremony." But her definition of normal seemed increasingly unclear. When she slipped and referred to her bridesmaids as her second-tier friends compared to her new social circle, I began to understand that Madison wasn't just adapting to impress the Bradleys, she was fundamentally changing her values. The final straw before the devastating email came when I discovered through a Facebook post that Madison had gone on a European bachelorette trip with Jennifer and several of William's female relatives. The photos showed them in Paris and the French Riviera, drinking champagne on yachts and posing in front of landmarks I knew Madison had always dreamed of seeing. When I called, hurt beyond words, Madison claimed it had been completely last minute, though the matching custom outfits and professional photography suggested months of planning. "Why wasn't I invited?" I asked directly. "I'm your sister. Your only sister." There was a long pause before Madison answered. "We discussed inviting you, but Jennifer thought you might feel out of place with the group. They're very, it's a different world." "And you agreed with her assessment of me?" The pain in my chest was physical. "It's not like that, Liv. It's just, some of these women have certain expectations. Their last group trip was to Dubai. You don't really fit with that lifestyle." "Because I'm a teacher? Because I can't afford 5-star hotels." "Don't be dramatic. It's not about money." But we both knew it was exactly about money and the status it supposedly conferred. I hung up without saying goodbye, a first in our relationship. That night, I cried myself to sleep, mourning not just my exclusion from the trip, but the loss of the sister I thought I knew. Little did I know that the worst betrayal was still to come. The day the email arrived started like any ordinary Tuesday. I was in my classroom setting up an art project for my third graders. We were making family trees with finger-painted leaves representing different relatives. As my students worked, I moved around the room, helping them add branches and names. 8-year-old Zoe was carefully painting a leaf for her sister. "She's annoying sometimes, but I still love her," she explained seriously. "That's what sisters do, right, Ms. Lawrence? They love each other even when they're annoying." "That's exactly right," I agreed, ignoring the twinge in my chest as I thought about Madison. During my lunch break, I checked my email while eating a sandwich at my desk. Among the usual parent communications and school announcements, one subject line immediately caught my eye: wedding update, livestream info. The message had been sent at 11:42 p.m. the previous night. I opened it, expecting details about the videographer's plans or perhaps a schedule for the wedding day. Instead, I read words that made my sandwich turn to ash in my mouth. "Hi, Liv. Hope you're doing well. Quick update on wedding logistics. With our final headcount adjustments and some last-minute additions from the Bradleys' side, we're at capacity for the venue. So rather than having you attend in person, we've arranged for a premium live stream of the ceremony and reception. You'll still feel part of things, but this way we can accommodate some of the more important connections William's parents need to include. The videographer says the quality will be amazing. You'll barely notice you're not there in person, LOL. I'll send the link closer to the date. P.S. Speaking of the videographer, any chance you could send the next installment of your contribution early? We're upgrading to the premium package to ensure the live stream quality is top-notch." My hands began shaking so badly I had to put my phone down. The room seemed to tilt sideways as I read and reread the message, certain I must be misunderstanding. My sister was uninviting me from her wedding, the wedding I had contributed $42,000 toward, and asking me to watch it online. Not only that, but she wanted more money for the privilege of my virtual attendance. The casual LOL felt like a slap. The reference to more important connections burned like acid. But what truly broke something fundamental inside me was the complete lack of recognition for what this would mean to me emotionally, let alone financially. Rachel, the kindergarten teacher whose classroom was next to mine, found me still staring at my phone 15 minutes later. "Olivia? Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't even form words to explain. I just handed her my phone. As she read the email, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to outrage. "This can't be real," she said finally. "Your sister can't possibly expect you to be okay with this." But she did expect that. The Madison I knew would never have treated me this way, but that Madison seemed to be gone, replaced by someone who valued social climbing over one of the most fundamental relationships in her life. "I think I need to go home," I whispered. Rachel immediately offered to cover my afternoon classes. "Go. Take care of yourself." This is beyond words. The drive home passed in a blur. I nearly missed my exit twice, my mind replaying years of sisterhood, teaching Madison to braid her hair, holding her hand at our grandmother's funeral, celebrating when she got her first real job after college. How had we gone from those moments to this cold, dismissive email? At home, I sat on my couch and read the email again, searching for any hint that this was a misunderstanding or a terrible joke. There was none. I scrolled through our recent text exchanges, looking for warning signs I might have missed. There were plenty: increasing distance, dismissive responses, requests for money without gratitude. I simply hadn't wanted to see the pattern. I called our mother, my voice cracking as soon as she answered. "Mom, did you know about this?" About Madison uninviting me from the wedding. The long pause before she responded told me everything. She mentioned something about space constraints, Mom said carefully. "Your father," and I assumed she was talking about distant relatives, not you. "Oh, honey. She wants me to watch it online, Mom. Like it's a concert I couldn't get tickets for, not my only sister's wedding that I've paid for half of." "What are you going to do?" Mom asked quietly. I looked down at my bank statement open on my laptop, at the recent check for $10,000 for the videographer that hadn't been cashed yet. Suddenly, with perfect clarity, I knew exactly what I needed to do. "I'm going to respect her decision," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Just not in the way she thinks." That evening, I pulled out albums filled with photos of Madison and me throughout the years. There we were building a snowman in matching purple snowsuits, making silly faces at our cousin's wedding, hugging on the day she graduated college. The pictures blurred as tears filled my eyes. I cried for hours, deep, body-shaking sobs that left me exhausted. But when the tears finally stopped, something else had taken their place: resolve. Madison had made her choice, prioritizing appearance over authentic relationship, embracing people who valued status over substance. She had decided my money was welcome, but my presence was not. It was time I made some choices of my own. I barely slept that night. Instead, I replayed every interaction with Madison over the past year, seeing clearly for the first time how systematically she had been pulling away while keeping her hand out for my financial support. Around 3 a.m., I remembered something our grandmother had told me when I was dealing with middle school friendship drama. People who want you to shrink yourself to make them comfortable don't deserve the full light of who you are. By morning, I had moved through hurt to a cold, clear anger. I made coffee and sat down at my kitchen table with a journal, methodically writing out everything I was feeling and thinking. The act of putting it on paper helped crystallize my thoughts. This wasn't just about being uninvited from a wedding. It was about recognizing that my sister had fundamentally changed, or perhaps finally revealed who she truly was. After finishing my third cup of coffee, I opened my laptop and began researching wedding contract legalities and financial obligations. Most vendors had cancellation policies, but since the contracts were in Madison's name, I needed to understand my rights as the person who had paid the deposits. I created a spreadsheet tracking every payment I'd made, taking screenshots of the transfer confirmations from my bank account. At 9 a.m., I called my parents and asked if I could come over. They were waiting for me in the kitchen, concern etched on their faces. Wordlessly, I handed them a printed copy of Madison's email. My father read it first, his face darkening with each line. He passed it to my mother, whose hand flew to her mouth in shock. "This can't be right," she whispered. "Madison wouldn't do this." "But she did," I said quietly. "And based on your reaction, she didn't even tell you." Dad paced the kitchen, his anger palpable. $42,000, Olivia. That's what you've put into this wedding. For her to treat you like this is unconscionable. It's not just about the money, Mom said, though we all knew that was part of it. It's what this says about how she values your relationship. Their reaction validated my own feelings, but what they shared next stunned me. Apparently, Madison had been systematically minimizing our parents' role in the wedding as well. They had been told they would not be seated at the main table during the reception, but rather with extended family. Madison had also asked them to tell people they were distant relatives if any of the Bradley guests inquired. "We thought she was just nervous about impressing these people," Mom said, wiping away tears. "We told ourselves it was temporary stress. We've been making excuses for her behavior for months," Dad admitted. "Maybe we've all been enabling this by staying silent." Their support strengthened my resolve. By noon, I had a comprehensive plan. First, I called the venue and explained that I was withdrawing my financial support for the wedding. The manager was surprisingly understanding. "We've seen situations like this before," she said sympathetically. "Family weddings can bring out complicated dynamics." Next, I contacted the wedding planner Madison had hired. I forwarded her the email along with documentation of my payments. "I'm not trying to cancel my sister's wedding," I explained. "I'm simply removing my financial responsibility from the equation." The planner, Vanessa, sighed heavily. "Unfortunately, this isn't as uncommon as you might think. I'll update the contracts to remove you as a financial guarantor." The caterer, the photographer, the florist, I methodically worked through the list of vendors I had paid, explaining the situation without drama or excessive detail. Most were professional and accommodating, though a few expressed concern about receiving the remainder of their payments. "That's between you and the bride now," I said firmly. My final stop was the bank, where I placed a stop payment on the $10,000 check for the videographer that hadn't yet been processed. The bank officer raised an eyebrow at the amount, but processed my request without comment. Back home, I created a detailed record of everything, all $42,000 already spent, screenshots of Madison's email, notes from my conversations with vendors. The remaining $8,000 I had promised, but not yet spent, was transferred into a personal investment account, my first step toward rebuilding my savings. With each completed action, I felt a mix of grief and empowerment. The sister I thought I knew was gone, but I was reclaiming my self-respect in the process of letting her go. Finally, it was time to respond to Madison's email. I drafted several versions, pouring out my hurt and disappointment in lengthy paragraphs that I ultimately deleted. I called my friend Rachel for perspective. "How do I tell her what this has done to me without sounding vindictive?" I asked. "Sometimes the most powerful response is the simplest," Rachel advised. "You don't owe her an explanation. She wouldn't understand anyway." Taking her advice to heart, I crafted a 3-sentence reply. "I've received your email about the wedding live stream. I've notified all vendors that I've previously paid that I am withdrawing my financial support, effective immediately. I wish you and William happiness in your new life." My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute before I finally pressed it. Then I blocked Madison's number. Not permanently, but to give myself space from the inevitable fallout. As the confirmation of the sent email appeared on my screen, I felt something unexpected: relief. For months, I had been contorting myself to fit Madison's new vision of her life, suppressing my hurt at each slight and rejection. Finally, I had stopped participating in my own erasure. My phone began ringing at exactly 6:32 the next morning. Even with Madison's number blocked, the calls came through my parents' phones, my work line, and finally from William's number. I let them all go to voicemail, needing time to prepare myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Madison's voicemails evolved from angry, "How dare you pull this right before my wedding?" to panicked, "The venue is threatening to cancel without full payment," to tearfully manipulative, "I can't believe you'd ruin the most important day of my life over a misunderstanding." William's messages were coldly threatening. "You've made a serious error in judgment," he said in his clipped, businesslike tone. "There could be legal ramifications for interfering with vendor contracts." My mother called around 9, her voice strained. "Madison showed up at our house at dawn, hysterical. She's still here. She says you've canceled all the wedding payments and the vendors are threatening to pull out." "Not canceled," I corrected gently. "I've simply removed my financial responsibility. The contracts remain valid. She and William just need to pay for them now. She says they can't afford to replace your contribution on such short notice. William's family has multiple vacation homes and belongs to 3 country clubs. I think they'll manage." Mom was quiet for a moment. "Your father and I support your decision, Olivia. We're caught in the middle here." "I understand. You don't have to defend me to her." The situation expanded beyond just Madison and me as the day progressed. William called again, this time with a different approach. "Look, I know my family can be intimidating. They have certain expectations that might seem excessive to outsiders. But this wedding is important for my position in the family business." "Outsiders," I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. "That's what I am now? An outsider to my own sister's life." William sighed. "That's not what I meant. The thing is, my parents made their financial support conditional on certain appearances being maintained. They want this wedding to reflect a particular image, and that image doesn't include a third-grade teacher sister? It's complicated," he hedged. "Actually, it's very simple. Madison chose your family's money and approval over her relationship with me. That's her right. But it's my right to stop financing my own exclusion." Throughout the day, I received calls from various wedding vendors confirming my withdrawal of financial support. Several mentioned that Madison had contacted them in a panic, attempting to dispute my right to remove my funds. As I had provided clear documentation of my payments, their hands were tied. By late afternoon, I felt emotionally drained but resolved. I had taken back control of the one thing I could, my own participation in this painful charade. What I didn't expect was Madison showing up at my apartment unannounced at 7 that evening. When I opened the door, I barely recognized my sister. Her carefully maintained appearance had crumbled, hair in a messy ponytail, eyes red and swollen, wearing sweatpants I hadn't seen since her college days. For a moment, I glimpsed the Madison I had grown up with before the Bradleys and their world had reshaped her. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded, pushing past me into the apartment. 2 weeks before my wedding? Do you know what a disaster this is? I closed the door quietly. "You uninvited me from your wedding via email, Madison. After I contributed $42,000 to it. How did you think I would respond? It wasn't personal. It was a space issue." Her voice was shrill, desperate. Then why wasn't William's third cousin from Phoenix uninvited? Or his father's golf buddy? Why was your only sister the person who got cut? Madison paced my small living room. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The Bradleys have expectations. This wedding isn't just a ceremony. It's William's future in the family business. And what about our future? As sisters?" I asked softly. "Did that factor into your decision at all?" She stopped pacing, her expression shifting from anger to something more calculating. "Look, I made a mistake, okay? Of course you should be at the wedding. I'll call you first thing tomorrow with your official invitation." We can pretend this never happened. But you still want my money. Her silence was answer enough. That email wasn't a mistake, Madison. It was a culmination. For months, you've been pushing me aside while keeping your hand out for my savings. You've been embarrassed by me, our parents, our background. You've reinvented yourself to impress people who would never accept you if they knew the real you. You don't understand, she said again, but with less conviction. Then help me understand. Explain to me how the sister who held my hand at Grandma's funeral became someone who could treat me like this. Madison sank onto my couch, suddenly deflated. The Bradleys threatened to cut William off if the wedding wasn't perfect. They've been looking for reasons to object to me from the beginning. I'm not from their world. So you tried to erase where you actually come from? It was Catherine's idea to have you watch remotely, Madison admitted quietly. She said it would be more appropriate given the high-profile guests attending. She convinced William, and he convinced me it was for the best. And you believe that excluding your sister was for the best? The pain in my chest was almost physical. You don't understand what it's like trying to belong in their world. Everything I do is scrutinized. Everything I say is judged. If this wedding isn't perfect, William's parents will never truly accept me. If they can't accept you with your real family by your side, they'll never truly accept you anyway, I said gently. You're building your relationship on a foundation of lies. Madison's phone rang, interrupting our conversation. William's name flashed on the screen. Madison immediately straightened her posture and wiped her tears before answering with a bright, artificial voice. Hi, honey. Yes, I'm just taking care of some details. Everything's fine. Watching her transform in an instant from my vulnerable sister to William's perfectly composed fiancé clarified everything. Madison wasn't just lying to the Bradleys, she was lying to William, to our family, and perhaps most tragically, to herself. When she hung up, I spoke with calm certainty. I'm not reinstating the money, Madison. Not because I want to punish you, but because I think you need to make a choice about what truly matters. If William and his family only want you under certain conditions, that's not love, it's a transaction. So you're abandoning me, she accused, eyes flashing. No, I'm refusing to enable you. There's a difference. I took a deep breath. I love you, and I'll support you emotionally through whatever happens next. But I won't financially support a wedding I'm not welcome to attend. Madison left without resolving anything, her parting words a mixture of guilt-tripping and vague threats about family relationships being permanently damaged. As I closed the door behind her, I felt a complex blend of sadness for what we'd lost and pride in finally standing up for myself. For the first time since this ordeal began, I slept soundly that night. The wedding still happened, though in dramatically different form. Without my financial contribution, and with the Bradleys apparently unwilling to cover the difference, Madison and William opted for a significantly downsized ceremony at a local hotel. I learned this not from Madison directly, but from our parents, who attended with mixed feelings. It was nice, but tense, Mom reported. The Bradleys barely spoke to anyone from our side of the family. Madison seemed to be trying so hard to please everyone that she barely enjoyed her own wedding. I deliberately avoided checking social media for wedding photos or updates. The distance I had created was necessary for my own healing, and seeing Madison celebrating without me would only reopen wounds that were just beginning to close. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life and savings. The money I had managed to keep became the beginning of a therapy fund, something I should have invested in long before the wedding drama. My therapist, Dr. Chin, helped me process the complex grief of losing the relationship I thought I had with my sister. You're mourning an idea as much as a person, she explained during one session. The sister you thought you had, the relationship you believed in. That's a significant loss. I also began practicing yoga and meditation, finding that the physical discipline helped quiet my mind when thoughts of Madison threatened to overwhelm me. A weekend retreat in the Berkshires gave me perspective and distance, allowing me to see that while Madison had made choices that hurt me deeply, those choices reflected her insecurities more than my worth. I started journaling daily, tracking my emotional progress and setbacks. Some days I could think about Madison with compassion. Other days the anger and hurt felt as fresh as when I first read her email. But gradually, the sharp edges of pain began to dull. 3 months after the wedding, I received a text from Madison. "Can we talk?" We met at a neutral coffee shop, both of us visibly nervous. The Madison who arrived was different from both the sister I'd grown up with and the social climbing woman she'd become during her engagement. Her hair was its natural color again, her clothes stylish, but not ostentatious. Most noticeably, she seemed tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "How are you?" I asked carefully. "Struggling," she admitted with unexpected honesty. "Turns out pretending to be someone you're not is exhausting, especially when it doesn't even work." She explained that despite all her efforts to fit in with the Bradleys, they still found ways to remind her she wasn't truly one of them. The final humiliation had come when Catherine had discovered through a mutual acquaintance that our father owned a plumbing business, not the property development company Madison had invented. She made this big show of asking Dad about a plumbing issue at their house, right in front of everyone at the dinner party. She knew exactly what she was doing. Madison stared into her coffee. I was so ashamed, not of Dad, but of myself for being embarrassed by him in the first place. "Have you talked to Dad about it?" I asked. Madison shook her head. "I don't know how to face him, or you, or anyone I've hurt trying to be good enough for people who were never going to accept me anyway." While part of me wanted to immediately offer forgiveness and comfort, I recognized that would be falling back into old patterns. "I appreciate your honesty," I said instead. "But rebuilding trust takes time. I need to know this isn't just another version of you adapting to circumstances." We established new boundaries that day. I made it clear I needed genuine apology, not circumstantial regret. I wanted consistent, truthful communication moving forward. And I explicitly stated that our relationship could no longer include financial entanglement of any kind. Madison agreed to everything, though I could see the new boundaries were uncomfortable for her. "I don't know who I am anymore," she confessed as we were leaving. "I spent so long trying to be what other people wanted that I lost myself somewhere along the way." "Maybe that's where you start," I suggested. "Finding yourself again." 6 months after the wedding, our family gathered for Thanksgiving dinner. The atmosphere was tentative but warm. Madison and William arrived separately. She came early to help cook, while he joined only for dinner, his discomfort in our modest family home obvious but unmentioned. By the 1-year anniversary of the wedding, Madison and William had separated. She called me the day she moved out of their luxury apartment and into a small place of her own. "He kept saying I'd changed, that I wasn't the woman he married," she explained. "The irony is that I'm finally becoming myself again." Madison began therapy, started a new job that didn't involve the Bradleys' connections, and slowly, painfully, rebuilt relationships with family and old friends she had pushed away. During one particularly honest conversation, she acknowledged how chasing approval had cost her the connections that truly mattered. "I thought belonging in their world would make me happy," she said. "But I was more myself in our backyard camping fort than I ever was in their mansion." As for me, the experience transformed my understanding of self-worth and boundaries. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both yourself and others is to stop enabling harmful patterns. The money I had saved after withdrawing from the wedding eventually became the down payment on a small condo, not as grand as the Bradley estate, but truly mine in a way their borrowed prestige never could be. My relationship with Madison continues to evolve. We're not the inseparable sisters we once were, and perhaps we never will be again. but we're building something new based on honesty rather than expectation or obligation. There's a different kind of intimacy in knowing someone has seen your worst self and chosen to stay anyway. What I've learned through this painful journey is that authentic relationships outlast superficial ones every time. The freedom that comes from being true to yourself, even when it costs you something, is worth more than any amount of social status or approval. So I ask you, have you ever had to choose between maintaining appearances and being authentic? What boundaries have you had to set with loved ones to protect your self-worth? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to be truthfully, unapologetically you.